Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is going to be a very brutally honest review of the Razer Viper Mini Signature Edition. I just want to start this review and say out of the gate, I am a large-handed user. My hands are almost 21 and a half in terms of length. So for me, the mouse shape has never worked. The size, the height of it, just the overall feel of the mouse in my hand, I'm not consistent with it. I was never consistent with it on the Viper Mini Wired, which is why I've never reviewed it and I've never really played with it. In terms of the Signature Edition wireless, I have the same feelings. I'm not consistent with my crosshair placement. I get a little bit too wiggly because of how flat it is and how short it is and narrow it is. And certainly I play very good with other small mice. The Bruce Lee X2 Mini, the Razer Orochi is one of my favorite mice. There's just something about how the Razer Viper Mini feels in terms of its height and being so close to the actual pad itself. That just does not feel good for me in this form factor. So keep that in mind when I'm talking about the mouse. It just doesn't work for me to begin with as a large-handed user. In terms, though, of the price point of $279.99, it for me after tax and shipping was $300. And I think for $300, when you take this thing out of the box, and it is a pretty premium feeling unboxing experience, one that I just don't quite understand because it's a gaming mouse. I think for $300, the number one primary thing that needs to have that wow factor is the mouse itself. For the mouse to be 49 grams and have these large gaping holes that you see here on the mouse itself, to me, there's just not that wow factor that I was expecting when I took this out of the box. And when you're using the mouse, the feeling of this being magnesium kind of goes away. It starts to just feel like you're using any other ordinary plastic mouse. So there's just not a huge wow factor for me. And I think for $300, there really should be. The things that matter to me the most are these switches. I don't want any side flex. I don't want any switch grind. And I need no post-travel, no pre-travel that feels to the extent of making these switches feel muddy, etc. For me, the scroll wheel is an absolute hit. I love the scroll wheel. I love how it feels. I think the steps are phenomenal. And just Mouse 3 is so spammable, really tactile, has a nice crisp, audible noise to it. It feels fantastic. I would love to see more aluminum or magnesium, whatever this material is. I think it's aluminum. I would love to see more scroll wheels like that on plastic mice. It has a pretty premium feel. Now, in terms of Mouse 4 and Mouse 5, that's where my issues kind of begin. I do have the wobble on the buttons when you hit too far forward or too far in the back. And the switches themselves actually do feel quite good. You get a nice feel to it when you get that actuation. The main problem, though, is all of the post-travel. You get that early actuation of the switch, and then the button just keeps going and going and going. And certainly if you're heavier-handed, it's going to be more noticeable for you. And because of that post-travel, when you are in-game, it makes the buttons feel mushier. It loses that flair of that tactile feedback and just overall does not feel good. So I got button wobble and I do have a lot of post travel. And if you hit the button in a certain way and you kind of lift off very abruptly, it does feel very springy as well. It's almost like, like boing, boing, boing. So I just do not like the feel of Mouse 4 and Mouse 5. It feels very cheap, especially for a $300 mouse. Now, getting to Mouse 1 and Mouse 2, I do have just a bit of side flex on Mouse 1 and Mouse 2. That's not really a huge issue for me. In terms of pre and post travel, there's just a bit of pre-travel. There's not really a whole lot of post-travel. So Mouse 1 and Mouse 2 actually feel really good. And they do have plastic bumpers on the bottom side of Mouse 1 and Mouse 2 to make it feel like a nice plastic mouse with very nice feeling switches here and pretty well implemented switches in Mouse 1 and Mouse 2. But for the switch grind that I have under Mouse 1 and Mouse 2. When I am in a first-person shooter, if I'm holding down to spray Mouse 1 and Mouse 2, if my finger moves at all, I will feel a switch grind on Mouse 1, likewise on Mouse 2. And actually, it might just be the magnesium grinding with the bottom shell, but it just doesn't feel good. And I think, again, for a $300 mouse, makes it lose that premium feel and overall makes for an unenjoyable experience after having spent that much money. In terms of overall build quality, the magnesium here is very dense. This shell does not move whatsoever, and my top shell does not move, does not budge at all. So it does feel very good. But again, as you are using the mouse, that feeling kind of just goes away. And when you are using it, it just feels like you're on any other ordinary plastic mouse. So I just don't quite understand the implementation here of magnesium. Again, especially with these large gaping holes, which for me are another issue. For me, with the large gaping holes, my meaty portion of my thumb, kind of the chicken leg looking part of your thumb, the meat actually does fall into the holes there on the bottom of the mouse. And this bar that comes across this one gaping hole here, my thumb actually grinds on that bar, making for a not so pleasurable experience. And then another area where my hand sometimes hits the holes on the mouse is near this area of my hand, near the holes in this area of the mouse. And you do feel quite a bit of grinding at times of your bottom portion of your hand over some of the bars on the mouse, and it just doesn't feel good. I guess you could be in one of two camps. You could think that the holes just make the aesthetic look absolutely phenomenal. I just think that the implementation of the holes doesn't feel good for me. Certainly your grip, your hand size, you might never feel those, but for me it's just a pretty unenjoyable experience. Other than that, there is just a slight little bit of a raise on my mouse 2 over my mouse 1. For me, there's no issue that kind of causes in game. I don't really care about it, but of course I would point that out in terms of the aesthetic and how it looks out of the box. And other than that, my mouse 1 and my mouse 2 just feel ever so slightly different than one another, but overall are pretty consistent. So for me, at $300, I would have loved to have seen a solid top shell, get rid of those holes, keep that weight at 49 grams. I would have loved to have seen premium feeling side buttons that don't have that springiness when you kind of lift off too much, no wobble and no post travel. And grinding on mouse 1 and mouse 2 for me for a $300 mouse is just a little unacceptable. And for me, the implementation of the 4K hertz, again, for me, I just don't really think there's much of a difference between 1K and 4K, especially when you are talking about kind of like the competitive advantage. I just don't think that there is one. And especially with Logitech now kind of leaking things with 8K hertz wireless around the corner, I just don't know if at $300, the 4K add-on is really that much to kind of add into the package. So guys, again, I stress the fact that I am a large-handed user. The small Razer Viper Mini wired has never worked for me in game. I've never enjoyed the shape, the size of the mouse, the height of the mouse. I've never played well on it, so I'm certainly not somebody who is or was looking forward to the mouse as much as another user. I think that if you main the Viper Mini, if you know that you play absolutely like a damn animal on the Viper Mini, the value here for you might be a little bit different than it was for me. So keep in mind, I'm not really hating on the actual size and shape of the mouse. It's just, again, it's not something that works for me. It might work absolutely beautiful for you, and depending on your hand size and your grip, you might never touch those holes. So I think for somebody who really adores small mice, the Razer Viper Mini Signature Edition could be a really cool addition to your lineup. But for somebody like me, I think it's just, for me, it was a total waste of money. But that is it for this one, guys. I will see you guys in the next review. Peace.